Hi, welcome to the bathtub. We're having our normal battle with trying to get music and a visual going at the same time. My technical battles with my production crew. There you go. Surroundets, the greatest Christmas album of all time. All right, this is our latest of the festive edition. This is probably our last festive edition before Christmas. And I'm going to stop it right there. And I wear this. A lot of people only know it's Christmas because on the bathtub I wear this hat. This hat is kind of like that big ball on the top of Empire State Building that comes out on New Year's. This hat has a very similar connotation for many of the people who've been watching this show since the 30s, when it was a radio show and it was hard to watch. It was not easy to watch back in the 30s. So today we're going to talk about just some fun stuff that might be unlike the really serious stuff that we do normally every week. This is a book I reviewed. I've been doing a lot of reviewing this year. I've enjoyed doing the essays, and I did a piece for the New Republic, a place I've always wanted to write for. I'm quite proud of this. I did a piece on these books, and I'll link to that down below. But it's the Library of America. Most of you guys know these because they're the black. I've shown some of them on the show. The Elizabeth Bishop collected work is in the black. There's black uniform, black editions. These are a little spicier. You know, it's called the American Science Fiction 8 Classic Novels of the 1960s, and they're in this. They're small, but they're really like tissue paper thin. So they're real. There's like about 800. Usually there's like 800 pages on each volume, and the print is kind of small. This is also the holiday cold edition. I still have excuse me. I have a terrible holiday cold. And these 2 volumes have 8 novels in them. And what was interesting about reading these is they look very serious. I mean, if I saw these and I hadn't read them before, I would probably have passed them by on the shelves because it looks like something like a graduate thesis staring you in the face. But, you know, I grew up reading all these books, and if I had known they were going to be serious literature someday, I swear to God, I wouldn't have read them. I was looking for just to read some crap, and I had no intention of reading anything that was going to be serious literature. I just wanted to read stuff that was fun. So anyway, I dug up all my old paperbacks. These are the actual 8 books that are in that edition, and they're pretty good books for the most part. I could live without 1 or 2 of them maybe, but and there's always ones that you wish were put in the book. You know, we all play that game. But basically, these are some of my favorite books from the 60s. When I was sitting in my bedroom, it was in the garage, and I used to sit down there and read old science fiction paperbacks. Just random order here, just because they're on the stack here. Clifford D. Simak, or Simak, I never know how to pronounce his name. Wave Station. Simak wrote these wonderful novels. He started off in the 40s, I believe, and maybe even earlier, writing for John W. Campbell. I mean, and I know this is the only show on TV where people blow their nose. Excuse me, but it's disgusting, I know. I had this horrible cold. I should just use this, shouldn't I? Simak wrote these really weird stories. They're kind of, he was from, I think, rural Wisconsin, he writes about. He was a newspaper man, and his science fiction stories always take place like out in the woods and stuff in Wisconsin. His stories, like most science fiction of the 50s and 60s, the short stories are always better than the novels. There were some of the greatest short stories were written in the 50s and 60s in science fiction. And the novels are often a little too long, and Way Station is one of them, but it's still a fun read. And the basic premise is there's a guy from the Civil War who gets hired by intergalactic space people to set up a way station so when people are traveling across the galaxy, they can stop in and have sandwiches and they go on. It's a completely ridiculous premise. But it sort of works, and most of the book is still fun, and I reread that, and I still enjoyed it. This Immortal, Rogers and Lasny. Most people know I'm going to have my festive Manhattan. It's my doctor. I don't want it. My doctor told me I had to have one of these every night. Rogers Lasny, most people know as for writing those unicorn books, or the Guns of Avalon books. What are they called? The Amber books, which I never really read. But I read all these early ones, and I remember really enjoying this Immortal. He's very funny. Again, his short stories are better than the novels, I think. He wrote one of my favorite science fiction novels of the 60s and 70s, which was Isle of the Dead, which I still reread is for fun. And this is pretty good. It's been reissued as his original title was And Call Me Conrad in here with, I guess, some editorial corrections in it and so forth. So Lasny was pretty fun. I don't know how well this book holds up, but he really writes well. He's a very funny writer, and he has great dialogue, really great funny dialogue. Here's the one of the ones I hadn't read. Poul Anderson, who used to guy I used to see around San Francisco when I was a kid, and he was a big, tall, Scandinavian type character with big glasses. Very nice man. Wrote lots and lots of stuff. Much of it quite good. This is one of his classics, and it's kind of fun, but it's really weird. It's called The High Crusade, and I'd never read it. I think it was actually published in analog, and it's about a bunch of people like in medieval England who get attacked by aliens, and they beat the aliens, and they steal their spaceship. It's the most ridiculous book I've ever read, but it's kind of fun, and I enjoyed it. We talked about The Past Master. Past Master is probably one of Lafferty's more accessible novels. I like his novels quite a bit, actually, and we talked about this in one of the previous episode, but this is the one with Thomas More, and this is the original. See, I really, I would rather have these old paperbacks. If I had my choice, if I had my druthers, I would have these nice, beautiful old paperbacks. It's just such a lovely old book. When I was like 15, 14, I must have cried my eyes out when I read Flowers for Algernon. One of the great books. Many of you have probably read this as kids, about the young man who's mentally challenged, as we would say now, and they put him through some experiment which makes him smarter and smarter and smarter as we move along. And I did not reread this, but I loved this book. I will never forget this book. We talked about Picnic on Paradise. There, the original is much. This is a great piece of prose writing. Nova. We have not talked about Delaney. I have mixed feelings about Delaney sometimes. I like a lot of his stuff, and I went back to reread Nova, and this is one of the better books. I remember enjoying this a lot in the 60s when I originally read it. But again, wouldn't you rather have it with the guy with the mechanical arm and some girl without any clothes on in a bed sheet floating through outer space? I mean, that's just a beautiful book. It makes no sense at all what it's about, but and it's a very technically complicated book, and I enjoyed Nova. Here's one of the writers we've talked about, and we're going to talk about a lot more. Jack Vance. We talked a little bit about The Last Castle. Big influence on Gene Wolfe. You can see it every time you read a Gene Wolfe. One of the, at least the Gene Wolfe space science fantasies, the Earth of the New Sun or the Book of the New Sun, whatever that, or there's 2 or 3 of them. And Vance is really a totally original writer. And rereading Inferior, which I read as a kid as well, again, the cover makes no sense. It's a naked kid floating through space. There's a lot of naked people floating through space in 60s science fiction, but it's still a beautiful old paperback. And there always is far future universes, far future societies, and in this one it's about a kid who's an artisan, and his father's an artisan, which means they actually sculpt these kind of screens or something. And the reason there's lots of artisans doing handcrafted materials is because there's a small number of lords. Look at England today and look at what's happening to America. We may be heading in that direction. There's just a small number of people who have all the money, and they can basically make everyone else live like slaves, creating handcrafted beautiful objects for their pleasures. And it's about a guy who goes on a quest to find a famous revolutionary named Inferior. And I read it again. I just really enjoyed it. I don't know. I can't describe Jack Vance. I think he's actually a better novelist than the Book of the New Sun. I know many people love Gene Wolfe, and they should, but I think you read these individual novels of Vance, they're really good. Some of them are very tedious. They kind of go nowhere. But most of the shorter ones are really good, and the short stories are often very good. So it was nice to reread all these. This is kind of a great, good-looking gift book, Library of America is quite cool for various reasons, and the books that are selected are perfectly good. Like all of us who reviewed the book, I'm sure many of us wanted to put things in that weren't in there. I wanted a Tom Dish book in there. I still think Tom Dish is the best of the 60s. The other one you want to see in there is someone like John Slottick. There's Mechasm, the great, hilarious John Slottick book from the 60s. The really dark, most of these books are pretty positive. Even after there's a nuclear war and this immortal, there's still kind of a lively world going on. Books like Genocides by Thomas Dish, which we talked about, or Mechasm, which is called The Reproductive System in England, like most of Slottick, incredibly dark and very, very funny. One of the really wicked senses of humor and kind of brilliant narrative eyes. The guy just wrote one sentence after another that just snaps, So anyway, those are all wonderful books. They're all available in this gigantic volume, and it's a good Christmas book to get yourself or for somebody in your family that likes 60s stuff. And again, it's very different from the science fiction and fantasy today. I just don't, the one thing I'll say about all of these books, each one is so different from the other one. They are not like, a bunch of, fantasy novels, George R. Martin like fantasy novels, or science fiction future, the Expanse type stories that it's kind of melodramas, serial melodramas. Each one is stylistically different, intellectually different, does things the other books don't do, and it's impossible to call them all one thing, such as science fiction. But I thought it was a great time to read paperbacks. All right, have a great Christmas. I think this will probably be our last episode until after Christmas, but who knows? Maybe I'll get bored and put another one. I can't put this hat on anymore. It's just too hot. And this thing, maybe I should go out with the music. This is actually a singing sweater. There you go. Okay. Happy Christmas, and we'll see you soon. Bye.